So I've been tuning into some interesting conversations about art in particular and expression. Um, like this morning it's been like a lot sort of coalescing. It feels like. So this morning I'm gonna put the link to her video. But oh wait, hold on. Let me look at her name again. There's a YouTube creator who popped up, Dacia Sade or Dasha. I'm not sure how she pronounces her name. I'll be really honest with you. So I hope if I pronounce it incorrectly, I will learn differently. But I'll link her video below. But she is elevating that conversation of, um, you know, art not reflecting reality. And specifically looking at how so much in mainstream art is this sort of like, you know, pop, or this like distillation, or this sort of like bread and games style of art versus like social commentary, and having some sort of point of view. And in fairness, full transparency, I haven't finished watching her video, but I think she's raising that conversation in an interesting way, and sort of going through like a brief history of, especially in the context of the United States at least, how art and story has been, sort of a revolutionary form and a radical form. And I would say, like, my brief thoughts on that, my quick hot take is I do think that still happens. It's just a question of which art gets elevated, right? And who has access to art. And if you caught my conversation with Alexandra Bossi, we talked about this a little bit too, in terms of like, just like self-expression as a form of, like, as a radical act of liberation, right? In a lot of ways. And then, so I started watching that, and then I was hopping onto this writing group that uses the narrative method with Sherry Foos, and like the whole sort of purpose of that space, like she creates these spaces where people can go and, write essentially like a page max, right? Like write for 14 minutes or so. And then share what you've written to be witnessed, not critiqued, right? So there's no critiquing involved. It's, you get a prompt, you write to the prompt, you get a second prompt to incorporate into what you're writing to sort of give it a little extra flavor, and then you go into a breakout room and share it with people, and that's it. And there's no critique, there's no feedback. It's not about commenting on what you wrote. It's about getting into a practice of writing and sharing that with somebody and having that be received, right? Having that be witnessed, which I think is really cool. Like, it's a really cool, fun space, right? And again, and it's like, and it gets me into that space of, this whole idea of like art is a form of self-expression. Art is also a form of social commentary. Like art itself, whatever form of whatever craft, whatever form you create with, is one of the spaces that we all have access to be creators, right? And in societies that are imperialistic or hierarchical or oppressive, creating is a radical act, right? Like an individual being able to create is a radical act. And it's interesting too, like, I've like in my own sort of personal journey or like spiritual journey, I, have delved deep into the realms of spirituality. I've done a lot of unpacking of my indigenous origins, which, like in terms of the European cultures that I come from, and the tangled web that is, being the daughter of many different immigrants to the United States. So that's the story for another day. But in doing that, I was learning about specifically in the British Isles and Ireland, because surprise, I'm an American with Irish ancestry. Like, but anyway, so all of it to say, right, like the the evolution of the Catholic Church and the monotheistic church, um, and how that was co-opted to consolidate power, right? And this idea up until, roughly like the Reformation, that all people could only go through certain people in order to access the divine, right? And people being illiterate or people not knowing Latin was a way of gatekeeping access to the divine, right? And that has shifted over time. And regardless of what spirituality like you practice, it's interesting to see how the sort of gatekeeping like mindset gets contorted, right? Like the intersection between power and gatekeeping. And even in the context of, my one of my professions as, whatever, as a multi-passionate person, but my clinical profession, right? Like there's a lot of gatekeeping in mental health, and there's a need for that on a certain level. And also, some of the ways in which it's gate kept really limits access to people who would be excellent therapists, right? And people who we need in that space. Because, like, frankly, therapeutically, people respond better to providers, to people who either have some sort of shared experience, or who are able to connect and witness from a place of experience, or from a place of just like realness and authenticity, not this like academic or theoretical approach, right? That is very like culturally specific, right? It's not like, there have been efforts to expand cultural diversity and inclusiveness in how therapy is practiced and how methods are like designed and implemented. It's not for lack of trying, but it's still very disconnected at times, and still very white, to put it that way, and so it's like there's ways that like the system reinforces itself, is my point, right? Where it might start with something that is well intended, or that has a purpose in the context of, gatekeeping, or even in I think it was in my conversation with Alexandra that I talked about like the bards in sort of medieval and like pre-Christian Britain, and Wales, and like the Isles, and the pre-Christian Isles, but and like part of that was a gate kept profession, for better or worse, right? But part of that was they were keepers of the story, and so there's a lot of power in story, there's a lot of power in history, and knowing the details of the story. And you want to make sure you get like the way that some of those bards, like the role that they played, were not necessarily as like artistic or creative storytellers who had creative license to like elaborate or embellish certain things. I mean, I'm sure they did, but like but the point was to be a story keeper, to be a history keeper, in a time when writing wasn't, like it was all oral tradition. And so you wanted to get the details right, because what if you get it wrong, and now history's changed completely, right? Like that's a lot of power to hold, right? And so there was a reason why like things were taught a certain way, because of the responsibility of the power that entailed. And I would say the same thing is true with therapy, I would say, and even to some extent, like, yeah, like what stories get told and who tells them. There's power to that. And I think that's also why art is so often censored and artists are so often on the fringes. Artists who come at art, who come at expression from that place of like telling their truth and being an observer and speaking honestly about what they're observing. And I was thinking too about like comedy, right? So you have comedians who like might be more slapstick or the sort of, you know, for lack of a better phrase, like the cheap laughs, right? Where it's just about like saying whatever ridiculous thing is going to make people laugh. And most comics, at least most of the comics that I tend to like flock to, what I don't know, like enjoy, and even some of the ones that I don't, but like they still play the same role where they are social observers, right? And so they're observers and they're making some sort of social commentary through, and they're using humor, they're using satire. So, you know, like you can go, and it's all about society. So some people stick to like, you know, the mundane aspects of being human. And so they're talking about relationships and family and some of those more interpersonal dynamics and making, like finding the humor in the patterns of human behavior, right? In the ways that we interact with each other and the ways that we react to each other. And telling stories based off of that. And then it kind of can go up to the point of political satire, like John Oliver and Jon Stewart and Trevor Noah, among others, to more just like social satire on like how society operates as a whole. And there's, you know, like I think the like Eddie Izzard's Dressed to Kill is one of my favorite all-time favorite stand-ups of all time. I quote Jeezy Creasy all the fucking time. And the Do You Have a Flag? Anyway, so there was so much in that, and like, you know, like Bo Burnham comes to mind. And there's this Irish fellow who comes across my feed, whose name I always forget because I just see the like little clips of his stand-up. But I love them every time. I should learn his name. But he has that kind of like comedic style. And it reminded me of, is it Nanette or Hannah? Nanette? Oh my God. It's been a while since I've watched their stand-up. But you know, like there's people who make these sort of interesting like commentary where like they're funny, but they're almost like yeah, like there's like this like comic philosopher kind of a thing. And again, it's similar to bards. That goes back to times when like the court jester or the fool was the only one who could essentially like call out the king because they were lacing it in comedy, right? Like they could speak truth to power by painting it in this, you know, sort of picture of satire or ridiculousness. And that was allowed. And so that's a lot of power to hold, right? Like that's a lot of, there's power to that, and having a voice and being in a position where you can express that openly. So there's a reason I think why, art is so often censored, and in the current cycle of like human social dynamics and geopolitics, for those of us who live also like in the United States, I can't really speak for anybody else, but like I would say in the United States / other like imperial societies, there is this like minimization or sort of like commodification of art, and Dacia talks about that a bit in her video as well. And so that's part of it why I get so distilled, because everyone's just trying to survive, um, and do what will, you know, make the purse strings happy, or maybe not even what makes them happy. I feel like that maybe that's, like not everybody's like like actively trying to sell out, right? Like, it's this there's a survival need at times to sort of adapt. Um, and I think it's interesting too, like the why of your art. And there's oh God, I really gotta get better at remembering people's names. Like as I'm so terrible at just like scrolling through things or like watching something and being like, oh my God, this is really fascinating. And then immediately like flutter, like let's see, like I'm like a hummingbird, right? Like I'll take the nectar and I'll be like, oh my God, this is delicious. I'm gonna go over to this next flower. And then I'll be like, wait, where was that flower from that had the delicious nectar? And like, I don't know. I remember like the meat, the substance of what was said. But I can't remember. I can't always remember who said it, so or like how to attribute, more specifically. But there's a creative coach on TikTok, and and again, and part of it is like I'm like with so much like inundation of information. There's a lot of people who are saying similar things in different ways, which is not a bad thing. But it's sort of like I'm absorbing like, like the way that I process information is like, what is the pattern? What are the common denominators here? What it seems to be like, what are the main themes? But anyway, so this coach was talking about like, it's really critical as an artist to know like why you're creating what you're creating, know your why. And I was thinking about that for myself because I'm in this place of like I realized that I really don't care about keeping corporate structures and systems alive. So I really like there are good people in corporate America, who I care about and want to want to be available to help them. Like keep their souls alive. But that's really, my focus is more on like that sort of soul driven, like creative spark side of things and not about corporate change or structure. I bled my soul a little too dry trying to change systems from within, in ways that were not very well reciprocated. And in fairness, like in some of the systems I was working in were much more amenable to change than some of the other spaces. But like, but many weren't. It was, yeah, it just, if I guess is what I'll say there. But, and so I'm in this space, like I've been in this sort of process of like, okay, so what do I actually care about? And, I'm making this choice that feels very selfish, right? Like I'm choosing myself, right? Like I'm choosing to pursue what I am passionate about, regardless of what anybody else thinks about it. And for me, that is diving deeper into my creative crafts, which is primarily writing, and then sort of learning other elements that I've always wanted to learn but never gave myself permission to because, society told me that was silly, right? Or that's not what you should be doing. So, like learning music production and learning, how to take lyrics and melody and compose a song, like actually compose a song with it, with instruments and everything, and improving my singing voice and all of the things. So like diving deeper into that sort of storyteller, writer, observer role that I've always played in my life in various ways, and pursuing creativity and pursuing avenues that light me up, that make me feel good, but the reason, and I have my reason for doing it that is beyond myself, right? Like, it's like I'm not just doing this for me, right? If I'm going to create something that is meant to be shared, then that has to be more than just about me, right? You know what I mean? um and it does, and so like being in these spaces and in these conversations, it does feel very much like this sort of um like coalescing of this personal journey where I am choosing a creative pathway. And I'm not like, I'm still figuring out how I want to integrate like certain things because I still do need to resource myself. Um, but I'm prioritizing my time and energy to support this like creative pursuit, right? In these, and like what I need in my life to be able to do this. Um, and that's like, and frankly, that's what I want to help facilitate for other people as a service, right? Like using all of the skills from all of the different experiences I've had as a professional person and also just a human who's been through things. You know, like, uh, like finding ways to like support or sort of coach people through that their own process of coming alive, because frankly, like that Howard Thurman quote, you know, do what makes you come alive because the world needs people who have come alive, like that's like, I feel like that has been one of my mantras and like lighthouses in the dark of like, yes, like that's whenever I get lost in like trying to figure out what the meaning, like what the point of anything is, or like why I'm doing anything that I'm doing, I often come back to that quote, and it's like, okay, yeah, like does this thing make me come alive, or does this like kill my soul a little bit? Like, am I dying a little bit inside whenever I do this? And if the answer to that is yes, I'm dying a little bit inside when I do this, and it's like, okay, time to think of an exit, time to find an exit strategy, right? Like time to see what is within my power to change, whether that's mindset, whether that is like habits and behavior, or whether that's like, you know, going full, you know, eject mode and like getting the hell out of Dodge. So you know, like there's options, there's layers to this. You don't always have to like quit your job if you don't want to. Um, but it's a personal choice and an assessment that needs to be made, and thinking about what does actually make you come alive, what keeps you alive, and not just in body but in spirit. Because there is much to human life that can be very enjoyable and very pleasant and worth living for and worth sharing. And I think that's also part of the power of art, is elevating those things within the context of our given reality, can also be a radical act. So like you don't have to be a political activist to be an artist. Like, you know, I think about a lot like queer artists who are openly queer and who are like hitting them, like it's like Chappelle Roan, for example, who's like, and others like who like hit the mainstream or who are making it big just by being themselves and singing songs and making art about things that are considered or have been considered taboo and are still like highly oppressed and like violently opposed, you know? And so like for some people, like their existence as a radical act in and of itself, or their open, authentic self-expression is a radical act in itself. And so whatever you create just by being who you are can be a political statement, whether you want it to be or not, right? Like that's a whole other conversation. But the point is, if you are a creative, or if you are someone who likes to create something, or even if it's like, you know, creating robots, or like, I don't know, like creating something like technical, like that feels more like scientific or STEMmy or whatever, you know, like you're still creating something. There's a reason why, the tech space, like innovation loves creativity. You know what I mean? So, it loves creative energy. And so, so, like if you are creating something, you are a creative. And what you create and why you create it is is meaningful and is more than just um, can like in today's day and age can be more than just like um, something silly or like extra or some sort of luxury, right? Like creating something just for yourself that you don't share with people is also a radical act. If you're, especially if you're somebody who is used to like having to grind or hustle your ass off, like having a hobby that allows you to rest um, and create and self-express without having to worry about whether or not that's going to bring in money or help you survive, you know, society, like that is a radical act. Like that is a revolutionary act of self-liberation. So I don't know. I've been like in these spaces and like observing these things, and so I don't know if any of this makes sense or if I'm going to even share this video, but that's basically been sort of like I'm in it. Like if you're in it here, if you're in this too, like I'm in it with you. Where, I have this. I'm in a situation where I have the flexibility, um, and because I am my own boss, because I am self-employed and I am my own boss, like um, there's risks that I'm taking, like, uh, there's risks to making some of the choices that I am making for myself in terms of the longevity of this endeavor. Um, and also like there's so much power that comes from recognizing just how much choice you have over how you spend your time and what you give your energy to, um, and taking advantage. And when you have, more time, like when you have more time, right? For some people that's like maybe only an hour a week max, right? That they have that luxury to choose fully for themselves and only for themselves, because of life circumstances, because of reality, right? And being in this position, like this privilege, but like I'm taking advantage of it. Like, yes, I'm gonna do this because I have the opportunity to, and so why deny myself this opportunity to really do something and pursue something that, for like definitely like the women in my ancestral lineage never really had the chance to do. Like there's so much there's so much depth and meaning that can come from it. It doesn't have to mean something. If you don't want it to mean something, you don't have to put meaning onto it, right? Like it's okay. It's okay to not be super deep if you don't want to. But I can't help but I can't anyway. We're not gonna play with those double entendres right now, but anyway, all of that to say, like for me, like as I'm thinking about why am I doing what I'm doing and what matters to me and what I care about, like I care about, choosing something for myself as someone who has been shamed into people pleasing and serving others, so as not to be perceived as selfish. And so, like, fuck it, I'm gonna be selfish. Like, I'm gonna be selfish and spend my time how I want to spend my time. And because I have the luxury to do so, I have the opportunity and the freedom to do that right now. So I'm not going to squander that opportunity. You know, I'm not going to deny myself of something or deprive myself of something out of a sense of guilt or shame or obligation to old stories or old patterns that I don't think should, like, that need to be changed anyway. So by making this choice, I am changing the pattern. Within my sort of like microcosm of experience, right? Um, and and I also care about humanity, and I care about people, um, and I care about like um, joy, like I care about like keeping people alive, but not in the sense of like, you know, having to prolong suffering for the sake of just like breathing. You know, like not like extreme survival, but from that space of like, I want to see a world where people can express their joy and can do the things that make them happy regardless of how good they are at it. Like fuck, like I don't care about, like I care about talent from a space of like inspiration and, you know, um like just like having a different perspective, right? Or having like seeing what's possible. But from a place of like when it comes to like human connection and what I care about for people, like do what makes you happy, love what makes you happy, love who makes you happy, like you know, be within the spaces that make you come alive, because that is one of the like that's the most beautiful gift that we can share with each other is our joy. And you know, and like and being and I think part of being in joy or being in a place where you can share your joy also means being able to share your pain and your suffering, right? Like I like my joy, like the joy that I experience or the joy that I witness in others that I savor and appreciate so often comes from knowing the alternative, right? Like knowing the cost, like knowing what it took to get to that state, um, or knowing the agony and anguish of suffering to see someone in their joy and being able to say, I am so glad that they are not actively in this feeling that I know so deeply and viscerally. And like, and I hope they never experience it, right? If they haven't. And if they have, like, wow, like, yes, that is, that's delicious. Like, let's, like, please, let's explore this more, right? Like, that's, you know, there's no shortage of suffering and hardship and cruelty that we are capable of as humans, you know, and that even just like the wilderness, like, you know, if we were to ever go back to like our wild roots, like nature is fierce, you know, it is not always kind and this like romantic ideal of, you know, harmony. Or I would say harmony is not free of violence. You know, like sometimes harmony is like, you know, predators preying on a species to keep the ecosystem in check, you know? So like it is there, like there's a cycle of life, and like death and whatever form that that takes is part of that. You know, and so this isn't about like, yes, like let's all just be like happy and free and like, you know, like rah rah sunshine rainbows all the time. It's more like there's no shortage of pain and stuff. Like we have plenty of that. We have plenty of that. And so like if I could, like if I were a superhero, if I were a superhero, I think like the cause, like I wouldn't be like a crime chaser. You know, like I wouldn't be like the superhero that's like, no, we're gonna stop crime in its tracks or whatever. I would be the type of superhero that goes after like joy stealers. You know, like anybody who's a bully, anybody who is like so like entangled in their own misery that they're like they can't help but make everybody else miserable or bring everyone down with them, not because um you know, and like and not because they're evil, right? Like I think people who are in that space like need like they need care and attention, right? Like there's something um they're miserable for a reason. You know, they're miserable for a reason. And I think that they deserve to have and receive care and attention. And we also know some miserable people who don't want that for themselves, or who when given that like they don't know how to recognize it, or they're not like they're just not ready, like whatever reason, like they're just it's and that's, you know, like this is where the therapist in me comes. Like I'm so non-judgmental, or I try to be anyway. Like, you know, I have my opinion. I'll make the statements that are judgy and opinionated, but from a humanistic standpoint, you know, like some people just, you know, like prefer the gray clouds in their lives, and uh because it's safe and it's familiar, and anything different feels scary and unfamiliar, and requires a change that is that doesn't always come with the guarantees that they need to feel safe taking that leap, right? And that is very normal, that's very human to be afraid of change and to be afraid of something that can be perceived as a threat. So like I have a lot of compassion. So even as a superhero, I'd be like, I'd be a compassionate warrior, you know, for joy. You know, like a compassionate joy, because coffee helps me talk sometimes. I don't know. But no, yeah, I'd be a compassionate warrior for joy. You know, like that would be sort of, and like uh I wanted to say enlightenment, but I feel like, you know, it's not, I'm not that heuristic. So or at least I try not to be. But like connecting people with like, you know, their own sense of divinity in the sense, like, and divinity in the sense of like, we are, as humans, we are born of the earth, we return to it, we're all part of this like bigger system, um and the like it can be really easy to feel disconnected from that. And I think the more that we connect to like the networks and threads of, you know, what makes life on earth possible, then it becomes like like the world can become a very magical place, you know, not absence of all of the harms and cruelties and, you know, um, terrible horrible things or suffering, um, but one that is balanced with and enhanced by like magic and presence and joy and creativity, right? Um, and we didn't even get into the whole like, you know, sometimes like to create is to destroy and to destroy is to create, like that whole, you know, cycle. But like, but again, I think it's just, you know, I don't know. Listen, I don't know if you followed any of this, if any of this makes any sense. This is a peek into how my brain works and what happens when I engage with the conversations that are happening in all of the different pockets of the internet in my life, and how I process that and put that together, sort of pontificate on it. So on that note, I think I'm gonna end it here because it has already been a very nonlinear discussion, and I'm sure that there are points that I raised and just left hanging there. So um, so if there was anything that I just sort of like dropped out there, and you're just like, wait, what you said this thing and like you never went back to it, or what did you mean by that? Please let me know, because this is just stream of consciousness with Amanda Jane. Uh, Maybe that's what I will. Maybe that's what I'll title this video. Cause what the fuck? I don't know. I swear, sometimes like I go back and forth between scripting and not scripting, and every time even when I script things, guys, like I'll get to a point and I'm like, oh yeah, but I also have this like, there's this tangential or this related thought or this other point to elaborate on within it. And then we're off to the races. There's only so much I can, there's only so much structure I can enforce for myself without an accountability partner. So anyway, I hope this is the longest sign off ever. I will see you when I see you. Let me know in the comments if any of this resonated, or if there's anything that you want to hear more about. And stay tuned for more stream of consciousness videos. And as I continue to cook on my creative projects, I will start sharing more about them. But they're in the womb. Like they're in like this, just like I'm very protective of them because they're still in this like gestation period of like, being in the womb, so to speak, the creative womb. So they're still kind of formulating as I'm, constructing them and playing with them and trying to give them some sort of shape and form. And I have new ideas every other day that I really have to fight shiny object syndrome, guys. It's a disability I have. But anyway, so yeah, so if you're into that, stick around, and let me know your thoughts. Assuming I've posted this video, because who knows at this point. Maybe I'm just going to post it and see what the fuck happens, because why not? Why not? Maybe I won't even watch it back. Look at me living on the edge. All right. Anyway, I will see you when I see you.